Hey guys, I'm just going to wait 1 second as the live stream will begin very, very shortly. So just give it 1 second as I have it pop up here on the YouTube system really quick. Just give me 1 second, guys, right before, because I gotta wait for it to pop up on my phone here before we actually begin. All right, so hello everyone and welcome back to another video with On Point Politics, another live stream of the On Point podcast. This is episode 2 of the On Point podcast. Today, the topics are going to be illegal aliens possibly being removed from the census and how the 2030 census will affect elections in the future. We're also going to be covering I believe we got to be looking at 2 RINOs that are going to be retiring from the House and the Senate and how that'll kind of shake up 2026 and the overall picture regarding the Republican Party on that. And we're also going to be looking at voter registration trends, specifically the state of Pennsylvania, and some really shocking developments that are going on there in the state. So again, guys, if you are watching, make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe. If you're watching this video, RC says, hi, everybody. Swinger says, yo, how are you On Point? I'm doing well. You know, we're going to be getting the show back on track. You know, obviously I was kind of infrequently posting, but you know, things are kind of coming along, and I'm going to be streaming almost every single day. My goal is going to be to stream every single day for you guys from Monday through Friday at about 7 p.m. Eastern. So make sure whoever's watching this have that saved in your calendar for 7 p.m. Eastern Central or Eastern time. And I really want to be able to grow this. I want to really be able to make the best out of this show. So make sure to share it with a friend, share it online, and save the time every single day at 7 p.m. Eastern. So we're going to be going ahead and looking at this first topic here. So Eric Daugherty says, huge news. The Trump administration is trying to remove illegal aliens from being counted in the U.S. Census. Stephen Miller says this would be detrimental to blue states who harbor illegal aliens and gain House seats and thus presidential electoral votes. Remove them, the Democrats will lose power. So this is a very underrated topic. A lot more people are bringing it up. I actually think I was one of the first to like even kind of mention this in the space. You know, there was a couple people before me that mentioned this, but there is going to be a really big problem for the Democratic Party heading into the 2030s with the brand new census. And this is almost kind of like an inevitable thing. Just FYI, that's going to occur. It's almost inevitable that this is going to happen because a lot of the population shifts that occurred during COVID were recorded after the 2020 census. So after the 2020 election had happened, they kind of stopped counting the population shifts. So a lot of what's going to take into effect in the 2030 census is actually from the COVID pandemic. And the map had already kind of changed where Republicans from the same electoral map had already netted 3 electoral college votes. And so looking at the apportionment forecast for 2030, we see that the state of California loses 3 electoral votes. 1 is lost in Oregon. Idaho, Utah, Arizona gain 1. Texas gains 1. Florida gains 1. New York loses 2. Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota all lose 1 electoral vote. And what's really interesting is that you'll notice the states that are gaining tend to be more Republican states, and the states that are losing are either swing states or they're Democratic, likely or safe states as of right now. So that's kind of what we're looking at in terms of the 2030 apportionment forecast. And this is really interesting because this is only a very, you know, preliminary forecast. You know, this isn't final. This won't be the final setup, but this is not even factoring in millions of deportations of illegal immigrants, by the way. And Republicans, if let's say, you know, I actually did the apportionment here. If we were to fill out the election as if it were 2024. So we would just kind of fill it out as if it was the 2024 election. So, you know, lean Arizona, you know, lean Nevada, Georgia and North Carolina are both lean states. All of the Rust Belt states are in that tilt Republican column. All of Nebraska is filled in. Colorado, New Mexico are likely states. Arizona is safe. Illinois is a likely state. New York is safe. Minnesota is lean Democrat. Maine is likely Democratic, and we have Nebraska second lean. Maryland, a lot of these are also safe except for New Jersey. New Jersey is lean, as well as Virginia and New Hampshire. And so if you were to actually look at the new reapportionment using the 2024 map, Donald Trump would have gotten 321 electoral college votes. And what's really interesting is that they kind of manipulated the census back in 2020 to actually kind of counteract any possible Republican win. The census was kind of tampered with, where a lot of the recorded shifts that year were factored after the census was already recorded. I have to kind of look up what's going on there, but basically they recorded the census at a certain time, and it kind of avoided a lot of these electoral shifts to take place. So it was very convenient where if the Rust Belt had all stayed Democrat, the Democrat would have narrowly ended up winning the election. Now, if the Democrat, let's say Kamala Harris with the new reapportionment, would have flipped the 3 Rust Belt states, she'd actually still lose the Electoral College. Even if she won Nevada, she still wouldn't have won the election. So Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina seem to kind of be the states that would put, the Republicans, across the finish line. And this isn't even factoring in millions of deportations that may or may not have potentially occurred. If those were to occur, the map is actually going to be a lot worse. You could even have it to where Georgia and North Carolina, if they were to go Republican with this map, you'd already get the Republicans winning the Electoral College because of all of the millions of deportations that would occur. And we see Nova Collins says, great job. Ryan M says, if he removes them from the census, would it go into effect immediately? No, it would be counted in the 2030 census. So this changes wouldn't take place until the 2030 election. That's why if JD Vance gets elected president, his reelection bid would actually be very simple. All he'd have to do is win Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina. That's all and hold all of the 2020 Trump states. If he were to just hold Arizona, Georgia, and North Carolina, he would be reelected in 2032. So that's why his reelection bid would actually be very straightforward and very easy at that point. Nova Collin also says, get them out ASAP. And again, if you look at 2032, at that point, maybe New York and Illinois are kind of competitive. Ohio, may still sort of be in this safe column. Pennsylvania, may be a little bit more Republican by then, but Georgia and North Carolina might be lean Democrat by then. Colorado would be safe, but then Arizona, Nevada, you could potentially still have them lean Republican, and then you'd have New Mexico be a tilt Democratic state, but even New Mexico would already put the Republicans at a tie. With just Arizona, Nevada, and Pennsylvania, Republicans would already be tying. And that doesn't even factor in any changes in New Jersey, for example, that could take into effect. I mean, let's say Wisconsin kind of drifts off left. It doesn't even matter because the Democrats are still at 219. Virginia seemingly, shifts left. Let's say New Hampshire does. Same thing for Maine. Even then, the Democrats would still only be at 239 electoral votes, even if they held New Mexico, even if they held New Jersey. Again, here, Republicans still at 280. Nevada, flipping Democrat, would still have the Republicans ahead. Even Arizona flipping, that is a narrow Democratic victory. And if Wisconsin were to stay Republican in this, then you'd have 277. And if Georgia and North Carolina flipped, and let's say Wisconsin stayed Democrat, Michigan stayed, and Pennsylvania is really close. Let's say that's the case. Let's say it's a very, very razor thin margin of victory there. And Georgia and North Carolina are really close. And Nevada is still really close. Nevada and Arizona go blue. The Republicans are still at 279. They're still at 279. If Georgia were to go Democrat, they're still at 275. So you see the math here for the Democrats is actually really difficult because they literally have to, like, Arizona and Nevada with the Hispanic trends is kind of looking very dire for them. And with like North Carolina and Georgia, I mean, at this point, if you were to have like, Pennsylvania, at this point go with North Carolina, Republicans are at 281 electoral votes. And this is a very, very problematic map for the Democrats because they basically have to win Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia to barely win the Electoral College. And even if they won like Arizona, they're still at like 271. So they basically would have to flip Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, or Nevada, which seemingly Georgia would most likely be that pick for them, that they'd probably be able to carry that. But like if Pennsylvania went with just Arizona and North Carolina, if Pennsylvania went red, the Republican already wins the Electoral College. So the math for the Democrats is extremely dire going into the next couple of years. It's actually going to be a really, really big issue for them going forward. And we also have this where we have CNN promoting an app which tracks the movement of ICE agents to warn illegals. ICE agents face a 500% increase in assaults and threats. CNN knows exactly what they're doing. And we see like, we can clearly see here, like ICE Block, you basically see like reported sightings and new crowdfunding, new crowdsourcing app flags ICE sightings. So you see this and like people can pinpoint it. And CNN is like promoting this as like, look at this. Users can submit ICE sightings, alert users to ICE sightings within 5 miles free, and it's anonymous, which is quite interesting. And this entire organization is basically aiding and abetting basically convicted, basically criminals in a sense. Obviously a lot of them are nonviolent, to a degree. A lot of illegal aliens are nonviolent, but they are still technically breaking the law, and you are abiding and aiding an illegal alien, which is a violation of U.S. Law code. So that is a really big issue for CNN, for the Democrats. They're resorting to importing millions of voters across the world, not necessarily to get them to vote in the elections, but that those states hold more electoral weight. It was never really about getting them to vote in the elections. It was always about filling up the population centers so that the states could actually have way more legitimate power than they really do. California, on average, holds about 25% of all the illegals in the United States. So if you were to basically get rid of all of them, California would end up having like 38, 37 electoral college votes. And that's enough to basically swap out like all of Georgia or North Carolina or Arizona. Like Democrats could win one of those and Republicans could still end up doing better just because of that alone, which is a huge issue for the math for Democrats. And if these, mass deportations do occur, you're going to have a really, really bad electoral exodus for the Democratic Party going into the 2030s. Looking at the next topic here, Don Bacon and Tom Tillis are retiring from their seats in the House and the Senate, respectively, after having issues with incumbent President Donald Trump. So Don Bacon won't seek re-election in competitive Nebraska district. Representative Don Bacon announced Monday that he would not seek re-election in 2026, opening up what will likely be a competitive race for Nebraska's 2nd congressional district. And as you all know, Nebraska's 2nd congressional district is the district that Kamala Harris won by roughly 5 points when rounded out. It is the same district that Biden also won by 7 points back in 2020. After consultation with my family and much prayer, I've decided to not seek re-election in 2026 and will fulfill my term in the 119th Congress through January 2nd of 2027, the 61-year-old Bacon said in a statement. After 3 decades in the Air Force and now going on 1 decade in Congress, I look forward to coming home in the evenings and being with my wife and seeing more of our adult children and 8 grandchildren who all live near my home. I've been married for 41 years and I'd like to dedicate more time to my family, my church, and the Omaha community. He continued, I also want to continue advocating for a strong national security strategy and a strong alliance with countries that share our love of democracy, free market, and the rule of law. The announcement comes days after a source familiar confirmed to The Hill that Bacon would not seek re-election next year. Bacon's decision to retire creates an open seat in one of the most competitive congressional districts in the country. Nebraska's second congressional district, which includes Omaha, was won by former Vice President Kamala Harris, which I already stated, in the 2024 election, and presents an opportunity for Democrats to pick up the blue dot district Bacon has held since winning it in 2016. The writing has been on the wall for months. Nebraskans are tired of the false promises that Republicans are selling, and they want real results, said Madison Andrus, a spokesperson for the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Don Bacon's decision to not seek re-election in 2026 is the latest vote of no confidence for House Republicans and their electoral prospects. Next November, Nebraskans are going to elect a Democrat who will actually deliver for them. So this is what the Democratic spokesperson is saying. Don Bacon has served our country with honor after 30 years in uniform and nearly a decade in Congress. Thanks to his steadfast and commitment to duty and principled leadership, both Nebraska and our nation are stronger today, said Zach Bannon, a spokesperson at the National Republican Congressional Committee. As we look ahead, Republicans are confident in keeping Nebraska's second district red as we maintain and expand our majority in the House, he added. And I'll actually be putting out a House prediction very, very soon. I got to get some stuff set up for that, but I am going to be working on a House prediction very, very soon. But again, if we look here, I mean, this is just like the one time that we actually needed this guy to show up. He decided to not really pull through for Republicans. I mean, he's opposed a lot of Trump's agenda, for whatever reasons he had. He didn't want to vote for the big, beautiful bill, which would get a lot of things like no tax on overtime, no tax on tips through. It would help fund more deportations with more ICE agents. It would help stimulate the economy. There's a lot of things that the big, beautiful bill has in it that Donald Trump promised on the campaign trail just a couple months ago, and Don Bacon didn't want to go through with that. And now that we obviously have a very small majority in the House, clearly he decided to not run for re-election, which is sabotaging Republicans in the process. And so that seat is going to be really close down ballot. It is a lot more closer compared to it being Democrat. It's a lot more competitive at the local level. So it's still going to be a tight race there. But I will say the Democrats are probably favored to now pick up that district. But we also have news that like Ohio and Texas are going to be redrawing their districts, possibly, which would net them about 10 seats in the House. So that will be a huge improvement for Republicans if they're actually able to do that. A lot of the reasons why the Democrats kind of have this like advantage going into 2026 is because the gerrymandering for Democrats is very, very advantageous for them than what it really should be. And then we look here, Tom Tillis says he will retire after following Trump attacks. So the two-term North Carolina senator was expected to contest one of the 2026's toughest races. Senator Tom Tillis, a two-term North Carolina Republican who was expected to contest one of the 2026's toughest Senate races, tried to walk a fine line between President Donald Trump and his purple state electorate. It backfired spectacularly over the weekend, with Tillis announcing Sunday that he would not seek for re-election less than a day after Donald Trump publicly attacked him for voting no to advance his big, beautiful bill. In Washington over the last few years, it has become increasingly evident that leaders who are willing to embrace bipartisanship, compromise, and to demonstrate independent thinking are becoming an endangered species, Tillis said in a statement announcing his decision. Tillis added that it wasn't a hard choice between spending time with my family or committing another 6 years in the political theater and partisan gridlock in Washington. As many of my colleagues have noticed over the last year, and at times even joked about, I haven't been excited about running for another term, Tillis said. The 64-year-old senator had privately leaning against running and had given himself until the end of coming August recess to make a decision, according to a person close to him, granted anonymity to disclose private deliberations. His decision-making included two questions. Would GOP leaders have his back, and would Trump give him space to be independent if he ran? It became clear to Tillis, the person said, that he would not be getting either of those things after Senate leaders made it only minor changes to the mega bill, despite Tillis's warnings and after Trump started publicly attacking him this weekend. he moved up his timeline and started notifying people over the past day that he would not run. The person said Trump reacted on Sunday by calling it great news that he was retiring. All right. While Trump's true social attacks might have accelerated Tillis's announcement, Trump called him, and among other things, a talker and a complainer, not a doer. He had already been showing ambivalence about his ability to win re-election while squarely backing Trump's agenda. He privately warned colleagues in a Senate Republican lunch last week that the mega bill's approach to Medicaid would cause him to lose his race next year. Remarks first reported by Politico. GOP colleagues chalked up Tillis's private warnings to his fears of a tough general election in the swing state, where popular former Democratic Governor Roy Cooper could be a formidable candidate. Senate Majority Leader John Thune said Tillis gave him a heads up that he would retire. It's unfortunate, and it's something he's been thinking about for a while, and he finally just decided that it was best for him and his family, he told Politico. In a different era for Republicans, an incumbent who had eked out a pair of close elections would be given grace to break with his party on occasion. During President Joe Biden's presidency, Tillis joined with Democrats to pass a major infrastructure bill and a modest package of gun control measures. More recently, he raised sharp questions about the nomination of Pete Hegseth as defense secretary before ultimately supporting him, and then effectively vetoed one of Trump's Justice Department picks. But Tillis came under withering pressure to fall in line on the mega bill, despite publicly airing severe reservations with the bill's approach to clean energy tax credits as well as Medicaid. In an 11th hour phone call with Trump Friday, the president leaned hard on him to change course, according to a person granted anonymity to share details of the private conversation. But after warning for days that he could not support the bill unless it changed its Medicaid language drastically changed, Tillis followed through on his threat and joined Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky as the only Republican voting against opening up debate on the bill. But it was Trump's public attacks that had Republicans privately preparing for Tillis to imminently announce his retirement. In a True Social post, Trump said that numerous people have come forward wanting to primary Tillis and that he would be having a meeting with them over the coming weeks. In a follow-up post Sunday, Trump said Tillis had heard the great people of North Carolina. 4 people granted anonymity to disclose private discussions told Politico, and shortly before his announcement announced his plans that Tillis was expected to announce his retirement as soon as Sunday. Tillis's retirement sets up for what could be a wild and crowded GOP primary in the Tar Heel state. Representative Pat Harrigan is viewed to be a potential contender and is close with Trump in his orbit. Laura Trump, the president's daughter-in-law, is also considering a run, according to a person granted anonymity to discuss her deliberations. Many GOP insiders believe a fresh candidate without Tillis's bipartisan baggage would have a better chance to unite Republicans and win a general election. Senator Tim Scott, chair of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, noted that Republicans have held the state's 2 Senate seats for over a decade and that the streak will continue in 2026 when North Carolinians elect a conservative leader committed to advancing an agenda of opportunity, prosperity, and security. The Senate Democratic arm immediately predicted that they would flip the seat, which is viewed as one of their top campaign targets, and noted some polls already had Tillis underwater. On the Democratic side, a former Rep. Wiley Nickel, who's running for Senate, said in a statement that he was ready to take on whichever Republican succeeded Tillis, but many Democrats have been watching former Governor Roy Cooper, who's been circumspect about his intentions to run for Senate and is expected to make a decision this summer. So this is the article that Politico had put out about Tom Tillis retiring. And again, guys, like Donald Trump had basically pretty much got elected on passing a lot of things that were in the big, beautiful bill. And I understand that he may have issues with the Medicaid language, and maybe that's something they could look into. But I think that to completely write off the bill just because of one piece of language, I think is a really bad move to do. Him as a political figure, knowing to keep his base, should have really kind of followed through on the bill and really explained his solutions onto how to fix the Medicaid language instead of just saying, oh, the Medicaid language is bad. He could have presented a solution and worked it out within the Republican circles. But as far as we're aware, he did not do that. And so now he's leaving a wild and crowded primary, and that could potentially put the seat at risk for Republicans heading into 2026. Incumbents usually perform a lot better than non-incumbents do. That's kind of just the name of the game. But with him being a very weak candidate, a very weak incumbent senator, it's possible that a brand new face could actually do a better job. And I think that out of all the candidates, Laura Trump probably actually has the best chance of winning the seat just because she has the Trump last name. And Trump actually does really well in a state like North Carolina, given its ultra MAGA base. North Carolina has a lot more MAGA voters than a lot of the swing states do, believe it or not. And so because of that, it also kind of plays in favor of people who lean more into like America first. So that's really where that lies. And usually in off years, the electorate for Republicans in North Carolina tends to be a lot better, believe it or not, in off years because the black turnout's a little bit lower, and that helps Republicans statewide as a whole. Looking at our final topic, major breaking news. Pennsylvania barrels toward flipping red by voter registration in 2026. Republicans just gained over 13,000 votes on Democrats in just 1 week. So the Republicans gained 13K votes in a single week. Democrat lead down to 74K, was close to 100,000 just a month ago. Since December, Republicans gained nearly 60,000 voters on Democrats. And that is a really, really big goal. The goal was to Florida, Pennsylvania. And we see that this is really big news for Republicans as a whole. And again, the Amish is very responsible for this. And this is a really big problem for Democrats because when you look at Pennsylvania, this is the prime example for the state. Okay, Pennsylvania is the biggest example, but Arizona is a problem. Voter registration trends are also looking good for Republicans right now in Arizona. Nevada, the same thing. Republicans keep gaining there. They also keep gaining in Pennsylvania. Georgia is a little bit iffy. North Carolina, they keep gaining in voter registration. New Jersey, they keep gaining in voter registration. And it's like over time, this is going to genuinely become a problem for the Democrats because usually the Democrats are the ones with the advantage on voter registrations. They're always the one who have the advantage on voter registrations. But unfortunately for Republicans, this is becoming a big problem. New Mexico, the voter registration trends are looking good for Republicans. If Republicans keep gaining voter registration trends, yes, it's not a number, it's not a one-to-one correlation. Even in New Hampshire, they're gaining in voter registration. So, and then in Virginia, it's kind of a wash for the most part in the inferred party data. It's kind of a wash there. And Wisconsin, Michigan, and Georgia have like inferred party data. But looking at states like Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Arizona, and Nevada, which register by party and they track these things, if Republicans keep gaining in these states in voter registration leading into the midterms in the next year, this is a really big problem for the Democratic Party heading into the next couple of years. This is a really big issue because the math is just not mathing. If Pennsylvania becomes like solid red, it's going to be a really big problem for the Democrats in 2028 and in 2026. And I even dare say that Josh Shapiro, with the gains that keep being made, isn't really guaranteed to win re-election. Now, I say he's the favorite, but Republicans just in 2024 were down like 100 and something thousand votes. Now it's only 74K that they're down by. In 2022, Democrats were ahead by 320,000 votes. If you look at the results for governor in 2022, with Josh Shapiro on the ballot, he won this race by like 800,000 votes. Okay? If you already factor in the fact that Republicans have already netted like 200,000 votes since then, that already cuts his lead down by 200,000 votes on like a good, estimation. Like if you were to just apply the raw shift to the election, it's a 200,000 vote increase since then. That is a humongous difference. That's a huge difference in voter registration gains. That cuts down Josh Shapiro's lead like probably 4 points. It cuts his lead down by 4 or 5 points. And that's not even factoring in independents. That's not even factoring in if the Republicans nominate a better candidate. You could possibly have Shapiro have a single digit race in 2026. This is a big problem. And we're in June of 2025. If Republicans keep on this track, they could be ahead by 100,000 votes in voter registration by then. And a lot of these new registrants, if they're applying, if they're registering in the off year, that means that they're much higher propensity voters. You don't register in an off year to not vote in a midterm or vote in a presidential election. If you're registering in an off year, that means that you're becoming a higher propensity voter. People who really care about voting usually register or do things with their voting record outside of actual election years. And so if Republicans are gaining like 15,000 votes in an off week, imagine what it's gonna look like by 2026. You could have Josh Shapiro only win re-election by a couple points. And even dare I say, if they pick a good candidate, if Republicans pick a good nominee, they could lose. He could lose his re-election bid and he wouldn't be the nominee in 2028 after that. He would be off the short list. If he lost re-election or only won by like a couple points, he would not be on the short list. The only reason why he's on the short list for this is because the only reason why Josh Shapiro is on the 2028 short list is because he won by a massive margin in the governor's race. He won by 15 points. That is the reason why he's on the short list. The guy's very overrated to a degree on policy. He's very average height. He's like 5'5", 5'4". He's as tall as Kamala Harris. Short people on average don't win the presidency like that. A lot of people don't know he's short. So when you put him and Vance in a debate, it's going to throw people off. And it's a subconscious thing, but it's 100% true. He's a very overrated general election candidate. He would have not helped Kamala Harris flip Pennsylvania in 2024. Pennsylvania would have not flipped. I actually think that this state would have been about the same. It would have been the same margin. Maybe it would have been a little bit closer. Maybe instead of plus 1.7 for Trump, it would have been plus 1.4, plus 1.5. But it wouldn't be like a huge shift for like, oh, he would have won Wisconsin, Michigan, but not Pennsylvania. That wouldn't have happened because he wouldn't have had a higher approval rating than Kamala Harris. JD Vance and CNN exit polling had a higher favorable than Donald Trump. That is extremely rare. That does not happen. That doesn't happen. One of the reasons why Vance had that is because of the VP debate. That is one of the main reasons why that happened for him, is because of the VP debate. That's why he was able to have a little bit of a higher favorable than Trump in some exit polling. But if it wasn't for that, he wouldn't have. And Josh Shapiro, I just don't know if he would have been able to really make that much of a difference on the ticket. And so I believe he's a very mid-tier election candidate for 2028. I don't think he's a good candidate for them. He's got a lot of skeletons. He's a decent communicator, but he's got a lot of skeletons in the closet. First of all, a lot of skeletons in his closet. And so if Republicans keep gaining in voter registrations, he is not guaranteed to win re-election, guys. He's not. He's not guaranteed to win re-election. It's the same exact thing. If we were to look up governor elections, right? Like, look at like 2018, like Florida. DeSantis won by half a point. 4 years later, he won by 19. Elections shift like crazy. They just do. Elections shift very hard from one way or another a lot of times. Like Illinois. Look at that. R+4 in 2014, 2018. It's D+16. Like these things are not. These things can swing in really opposite directions. He is not guaranteed to win. And the way that Republicans are gaining in Pennsylvania, it is a really big problem heading into 2026 for them. A huge issue. Really, really big problem. And so that's pretty much it for this live stream, guys. These are all of the topics that I wanted to cover today. If you guys did enjoy this, make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe. I will be posting the clips afterwards, so make sure to pay attention to that. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button as well. Make sure to go ahead and check out my Connect and the GoFundMe in the description down below. We are fundraising for polling with SoCal Strategies. So, and we'll be doing that a little bit more hardcore in August. So guys, keep that in your head. We are going to be fundraising for SoCal's, New Jersey polling, national polling, and Virginia polling. Getting closer to August time is when we're going to really be fundraising for that. But right now, just go in the description. You can support the channel through GoFundMe. You can support it through just looking at my Connect. You can reach out on Connect as well. And I will see you guys in the next live stream. Everybody, peace out.